Can you hear me? Am I good? Okay. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public is participating knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Clerk, can you give a roll call?
The special session of the Unified Government has been called to be held Thursday, December 16th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. for a legislative program update. Roll call, Markley. Here. Stites.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Bynum. Here. Burrough.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Garner.
Here. Thank you. Tonight we'll have an update on the legislative program. I'll turn it over to Administrator Bach at this time.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. It's a pleasure to be here this evening in front of you all to go over what is being proposed as our state legislative program. I believe all these documents were delivered to you in a draft form about a month ago to give you a chance to review through these. As we do every year, as staff, we go out and try to get information back in from other members of staff or commissioners as to things that are going on that we need to pay attention to at the state level. Many times we find ourselves playing defense at the state level. We've seen money being taken away from local programs or directed to local programs. So those are things we want to watch out for and make sure we have them in, but also go through different policy initiatives. As you know, in previous years, we've had Mike Taylor do this role for a long time. Mike retired from our organization last summer, and we're in the process of a little bit of restructuring. So I asked Assistant County Administrator Melissa Sieben this year to go through and try to coordinate everything that we have to build into this recommended program. Obviously, this is your program. If you have changes and such you want to make to it, those are things you can offer up tonight or in the coming weeks, and then we will be looking to bring it back in early January for adoption. But Melissa's gone through this to put it in a format to be able to present tonight. So she's going to walk through the topics and try to make sure we have answers for what you're looking at. Melissa?
All right, thank you, Doug. So Ronald is going to do me the favor of pulling up my PowerPoint. Thank you, kind sir. So as Doug noted, we do and have for as long as I've been here and probably many, many years prior, always prepared a state legislative program for the governing body to consider. And what we have here tonight, much of it is what I would consider standard from past documents. I do have an entire section at the end that will be things that we've added on. The only thing that I can also tell you is as we kind of move through this, there were things I did take out if they were approved by the legislature or the change was positive to our favor. So that way we're not looking at stuff that's kind of aged out of need. This next slide, as it loads, just going to kind of show you that we're going to walk through starting on the right with tax and finance. I'm not sure what that is, and move through to the kind of community and economic development bucket, public safety, of course, local government operations, public health, and then the other policy considerations when we get there, that's going to be the stuff that I'm suggesting we might want to consider as new. And then, of course, there may be things that we did not catch as staff. I worked with the League of Municipalities and others to try and kind of complete and round this out. So I am open to whatever feedback you have. So for tax and finance, the highlighted ones are on here are ones that we had a little wording change to. They're not added, but there's revised language that I pulled from the work that the League of Municipalities had been doing with its cities. And so they're tweaks primarily. And I'll just kind of, I'm going to quickly explain these. And if you have questions, go ahead and stop me now or stop me at the end and we can back up too. So the first kind of tranche of these are a lot around home rule, but they're gonna, and I'm just gonna quickly pound through these. Motor vehicle tax. We've talked about this in the past. You know, our tax rate here is relatively high, and then that's how they calculate the state's or the vehicle tax for us. So if you were in Johnson County and your mill levy's lower, you pay less for the same car that you would pay here. So there's an equity issue there, and that's something that we've had on there for a number of years that we'd like to see addressed between the counties. The next item here is on local revenues, and this is kind of our general catch-all for anything that we generate as a revenue to support our operations, that the state legislature not look to take that away from us in any way, that we as a local government are closest to the people and therefore closest to our needs and how we are going to fund those. The next one is on appraisals. This stuff, some of this has been kind of added due to the dark store theory that we've been dealing with here for a while. The next two kind of, the next one goes to that on the appraisals and simply looking for a fair market appraisal as opposed to things that are manipulated, especially with the BOTA at the state level. And then, of course, we go on to property tax transparency. There's been a lot of changes and adjustments at the state level for the last couple of years where they've wanted to put more onus on local governments, but then leave out other taxing jurisdictions from the same burden. So simply asking for a level playing field and level access to that information for taxpayers on all levels of taxation. And then the spending lid conversations, which have been going on at the state for a while, and basically, again, going back to that home rule concept. So the next slide, we're going to kind of talk about unfunded mandates. Again, this is a really general statement, and it appears in a couple of different areas in here, but asking that, you know, things aren't just passed down to us to do as a requirement if there's not funding associated with it or a revenue that we can collect to be able to afford to provide the service. That has been a continuing problem, at least for the last 20 years for local governments. And then LAVTR, for some of you who've been around maybe a while, you might remember when we received this local ad valorem tax. And it's been gone for a while, but it's something that we would encourage the state to reconsider given how its fund situation seems to have demonstrably improved. And then lastly, here is just the sales tax issues and the tax base. We want to kind of keep that the way it is and allow us to be able to count on that going into the future. Last slide on tax and finance. Capers, this one was changed a little bit, and all that was added was that we are interested in looking at some kind of inflationary increase for folks who get a state pension, or that was the language that's added. So that would be something, if you guys were not interested in pursuing that we certainly could strike back to the way it was. And then, of course, the last two are adds to language that shouldn't be of controversy, allowing local governments to develop new revenue sources, which are needed as the entire structure of global products, services change. We need to be able to change with those. And allowing local governments to directly participate in federal loan programs. State of Kansas, unlike some other states, does not allow direct local participation in many of those programs. We're required to go to the state. So that's all I have on that area. Comments, questions?
Bynum?
Thank you, Mayor. If you don't mind, before we leave this section, if I ask a question here.
Yes, proceed.
And I'm going to kind of turn to Commissioner Burrows a little bit too, being that you've been in Topeka, and I think you can help us answer. And I mean that in the very best way. But the local ad valorem tax, if I'm not mistaken, over the years, that tax has stripped millions of dollars. 14 million is what's in my mind. From Wyandotte.
tell you the exact number.
But
Why not?
it's multi-millions, I think.
It's 2 billion statewide.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, that reasoning began back with state budget woes. Is that true?
It was actually before that. There was a thing, it was right along with the machinery and equipment tax
Yeah.
that was put forward. Oh, sorry. It was actually before that. Machinery and equipment tax came through about the same time. And there was a phase put in called the Siegfried slider. It was named after the chairman of the committee because it came up with a tiered process in which I believe the hit to Wyandotte County was 16 million on machinery and equipment. And they put in a slider that said those communities will receive 90% first year, 70, and it would slowly go down. They paid the first year, then they quit, and then the recession hit, and they quit doing the ad valorem and all the revenue sharing and went back to the government. The state stopped all of that.
So what I'm hopeful for is, I think the state budget is now quite healthy. And what are your feelings on getting a return of some of our local ad valorem? I'm highly in favor of requesting it because we really need to stop the bleeding there.
Do you want me to answer that question? Yes. There was a bill that was going to be introduced last year that would have put 50 million of ad valorem back into the formula. The Governor Kelly chose to add that to her agenda last year. I don't know where it is in the tax committee at this particular time, but there is a movement. As you are correct that the state budget is healthy and it has exceeded all expectations in the revenue side. But be mindful, we went through 8 years of tremendous budget cuts, and loans were made and money was borrowed from different agencies, and those are being paid back as we speak, including stopping payment to capers and other things that the state is responsible for. So once those catch up, I anticipate there will be much discussion in reference to the ad valorem taxes being put back forward. But if we're not successful, I have a bill on my desk ready to go also in case the governor's bill, because we sometimes there's multiple bills introduced because you never know which one will be stripped and hijacked. So we always have another one, but I believe there's opportunity for that discussion.
Thank you. That's really encouraging to hear.
Any other questions before we leave this section? Yes, Commissioner Ramirez. Oh, sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a simple question, especially for the viewers who are watching. Can someone explain what that ad valorem tax sharing program is? Commissioner Burrows or Melissa? Because I know there may be some viewers who are hearing this, but not exactly know what it is or ever heard it. So I just want to make sure we're
It's a
educating the
revenue
community.
sharing tax, and without getting in the weeds, I probably should be best stop right there. But if the monies are sent to the state, there's a formula that divides up those revenues, and then those portions come back to the local unit of government to be distributed among others, but particularly goes to our general fund most of the time. But without getting in the weeds, it's a little difficult to comprehend. It takes some time. That it is just a revenue sharing that the state's responsible for. There was an agreement. They took some stuff away, agreed to send this money back if we allow them to do it. They captured it, broke their commitment.
And this has been over a decade. So it's been gone a while. So, okay. So the next area, if there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and move on. All right. Looks community and economic development area. Again, here, these are some ones that we've either made a slight change to or added. We saw them as non-controversial. So just as we go through them, the ones that are highlighted just for your thought processes. Okay, so here on this section, we have the first two items that are in the highlighted box are really standard, please continue to let us use eminent domain for blight and revitalization purposes. Much of eminent domain was stripped with the Kelo decision a number of years ago, but there are a few carve outs as some of us are aware for that. just to protect that. And then the next comment here is on fair compensation for use of public right-of-ways. Over the last probably 2 decades or more, utilities, particularly communications utilities, have really reduced our ability to be compensated for use of right-of-way, and also have made it very challenging for us to regulate the look and feel of our right-of-ways in some aspects. So that's what this is referring to there. And then on abandoned housing, just continue to work on allowing municipal governments to be able to address that in a faster fashion than we have struggled to do here. So, and we've got all the tools in our kit and still cannot move very quickly on that. The rental side as well, just here, helping make sure that those houses are quality and safe and don't have negative impacts on their neighbors. On the tourism side, this is kind of digs into the interest of having a statewide tourism plan, which I'm sure our former Visit KCK Director Bridget Job would probably love to have funding for. And then the Star Bond side, which we obviously have used extensively here in Wyandotte County to keep it as an economic and job creation tool. And then the last one here is about TDDs, or transportation development districts, which simply help support and sometimes economic development, but also public infrastructure when we need to address it in different ways based on where you have demand that would help pay a fee. Then we have prevailing wage on here again. The state currently doesn't allow us to impose prevailing wages as a local unit of government. When we're using federal funds, obviously we do follow Davis-Bacon, but that's what this is in regards to, and as well for economic development projects. And then we also have the food sales tax on here as well. This is a little bit different because we're seeing a push at the state level. There's been some conversation about elimination of that, but the concern for us here, especially in Wyandotte County, is we have quite a few layers where grocery stores are paying for redevelopment. And so we want to look at how we could protect those local abilities to create opportunity to access to food while lowering the burden on our residents from a sales tax basis. So I think that's important for us to understand that nuance. And then just down here, state highway maintenance within cities. I think that, we've seen continued benefit. If you look at Leavenworth Road, and that was more than maintenance, but if we can have those dollars flowing into our community to keep those state highways maintained, it benefits us overall. And then funding for all types of modes of transportation. I think the state worked well with us on Turner Diagonal to get a pedestrian crossing, but that's what this is suggesting, is that when they make investments, they make a multimodal investment, which supports our plans to have, access to all modes in our streets. Then there's a couple other state programs here that are ones that KDOT initiated: Connected Links, Comprehensive Transportation, and so on, real basic stuff. And then on the recreational trails, just allowing local units of government to be able to do those, not stripping our ability to work with easements and other things of that nature to create those spaces for our residents. And the last one under this is immigration, which I believe we may have added this in the last couple of years, but this one simply is noting that there's an extreme cost for mandated enforcement of these measures if states do so, and that we're basically opposed to that. That's what the previous agreements on this were about. So any questions? Because that should be the last in that section. Yes.
Mayor McKiernan, sorry, Commissioner McKiernan.
Commissioner. No, you've got the M. So if you could go back to your first slide, please. I see here we continue supporting transportation development districts, which I do.
Mhm.
Does this imply that there is some sort of a sentiment toward taking away the ability to create transportation development districts? we're aware of anyway.
I don't know that we're aware of anything that's actively out there. I think this states our position that we think they're a valuable tool that should be maintained in the state.
Okay,
Unless you heard something different, Melissa?
I would say in previous years, we've seen these come up for modification, kind of falling sometimes in with the star bonds conversations, but I don't know of anything in particular for this coming year. This just gives your lobbyist, when we hire them here shortly, the ability to lobby should something come up.
okay, thank you, because certainly that has proven to be a valuable tool in the past. If you go to the next slide, please.
Yes.
Our one is the third bullet, funding, continue supporting funding for state highway maintenance within city limits. Again, I'll ask this in a, is there any move to lower the level of state funding of state highway maintenance like 7th Street within city limits that we're aware of?
Not that I'm directly aware of, but I do know that it at times the state will come to us and ask us to take back a roadway in the city. And so then it becomes incumbent upon the local unit of government to figure out how they would absorb that or what kind of trade they could make with the state as it pertains to that transfer. So,
Okay, certainly would.
so if it's
support-
funded, they're not asking.
Certainly
make
would
sense?
support continued cooperative maintenance of any state highway within city limits. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my question is more for Emmerich pertaining to the recreational trails. It says ability. And from what I understand of how Melissa described it, are there barriers the state puts on us where we can't do recreational trails?
No, Commissioner, there's none that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
I think it's, Melissa, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of we just don't, actually, I don't know, to be quite honest with you, but I'm unfamiliar with any state regulations that prohibit us from creating trails within our own system, within our own parks.
It's
Okay.
much like some of the other regulations they put on rights of way and things of that nature that
Okay.
could easily bleed over into this. So I think it's probably more dependent on maybe other parts of the state, but since it's something that we've been exploring here,
Mhm.
I thought pulling that out of the league's agenda was a good idea for us to consider.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Could you go to the slide for immigration? I think, okay, so what would be an example of enforcement or state enforcement of immigration measures that cost local governments?
Okay, so my understanding, again, not as well versed in this maybe as I should be, but is that the state can say, we're going to require you, local unit of government, to round up people. And in doing so, we incur a cost for holding them in our facilities until such time as either the state or federal government would come get them, which depending on the resource constraints, which often there are, that would cost us money at whatever rate we bill a day for holding those folks. So Commissioner Burrows, any extra one on that?
I would say that's an accurate statement. If there was a mandate to take upon our local community resources that aren't refunded. Now, the state could come in and mandate that we do something, and then they could have the costs. They could bear the cost of that. But this is basically to ensure that we as a local government don't bear the cost of doing federal government work
Correct.
and or state work, because the state's going to be mandated by the federal government to do just that. So hope that clarifies a little more, Commissioner.
All right. Ready? So next up is public safety. And this one, again, a few little things that were added, which I think one of them I'm kind of excited about because I found this and it was on scrap metal, and with the blight work that we're doing, it's just one more area that I think we maybe could add to. So here we go. So on municipal courts, we have language that's been in for a while about letting us kind of determine how we run or conduct the business of municipal court. I think that we've seen with our judges over the last number of years, they've brought forward some concepts on changing sort of how we handle people when they come through our system to be a little bit more benevolent and give them opportunities to interact with us differently. And so it's basically requesting the state not get into the middle of how we run our local courts. Commissioner Burrows, I see you turning your mic on. Yes, no, turning it off. Nope. Okay, sorry. And then the next one down here is on medical charges. This is, again, trying to get the cost placed with the person who's been incarcerated as opposed to it placed back on us. So just kind of making sure that those that incur it are being charged as part of their detention. And then asset forfeitures, we receive dollars from seizures and are able to then sell that property after a period of time, and that becomes a local source of revenue, which we dedicate typically back to public safety purposes. Just that's occasionally been up for suggestion that it go back to the state. And then on the juvenile justice side, just looking for being compensated for the cost of managing juvenile offenders for the state. So any other comments before I move forward?
Melissa, would you
Yeah.
make sure you keep the microphone in front of you? You're tending to drift away from it a couple of times, and we've got
Okay.
a little vent noise back over here that we lose you every once in a
Okay,
while.
thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so next up, under law enforcement, we have just the kind of the discretion of how we want to set our policies within obviously state and federal laws to as far as pursuits or arrests. This has been in here for a number of years. Not specific language, it's pretty broad. Next up, there's the emergency 911 services, which currently, we have our own 911 dispatch, and then we work with the Mid-America Regional Council on our overall governance of our 911 systems, and those revenues help support those services. There's been conversations, not recently that I'm aware of, but about the state taking some of that back in or managing it differently. So we'd like the flexibility on how we use those as well. So if there's another portion of local municipal emergency response services that those dollars could benefit, we'd also like some flexibility there. Then coming down here, community corrections, just full funding. A lot of the stuff that you're going to see coming up is about funding that's been stripped, kind of like the LFATR and the first set of slides. And then local control for police powers, just, trying to, again, put that stuff back into the hands of the local government. This one particularly goes at the health and safety and welfare side, which was taken out in 2020 during the height of COVID at the state level. And then how we administer and manage alcohol and liquor sales, whether it's the sale at a liquor store or in a restaurant, just to keep that local as well. So we have the ability to pull a license if we deemed necessary. The last one is scrap metal. Cities right now don't have the ability to regulate it. So much like we can regulate other things where people have to kind of share information with us on how they're managing and handling it, currently that's not allowed under statute. Okay, next slide, cybersecurity. So this one was of interest to me just because I think.
Melissa,
Yeah. Go ahead.
did you have a question?
I did, and I decided to play by the rules and actually raise my hand here if I could.
Okay,
So if
go
I-
ahead.
back to the previous slide.
Yes, sir.
I just want to know on scrap metal,
Mhm.
what do we mean by regulate scrap metal? Does that mean regulate who and how many can accept scrap metals, how they pay for them, how they report back to us, or this, is it all of those?
I'm pretty sure it's a wide breadth, but I think it starts under KDHE statutes, probably how they manage and handle it. But it also if we're doing that, then we need to be able to regulate if someone's dumping it or how they're handling it, sitting on site, things of that nature. So,
Okay, so in addition to who can do it what they can take, what they pay for what they take. We might also want to regulate how they store and transport, for example, chipped metal.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Apparently, we've not had a huge problem with that, but apparently others have. So,
I will just say that in my district, we have a very upstanding scrap metal company.
yes,
that
you
I'm sure
do.
would love to provide input and ideas
Mhm.
for us on what would be good policy.
Sure thing. All right, I have a note to talk to you. Anything else? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next section unless there's more questions. This is local government operations as a broad category. And here, the ones at the bottom again, broadband, public water supply, and building codes are ones that I thought would be generally accepted, that were in the league's language. So that's why they're highlighted. Otherwise, the rest of them were ones that we already had in. Again, general home rule, and then utilities, the ability to operate municipal utilities. This has been more on the broadband side of things. I'm not talking so much about gas and electric or even for that matter, water, sewer, but kind of in general, there's been conversations about whether or not municipalities should do those, especially by the utility companies. And then public and private rights of way, we've already talked about that we should be able to still receive revenues when private entities are placing things in our rights of way. Keeping city elections nonpartisan has been in our agenda for some time. Legislative advocacy, allowing local governments to do that. A number of years ago, this has been a while, I was in Gardner, Kansas, when this came up, that there was a lot of disclosure stuff that was going to start going on around that. And I remember chambers got hit by this as well. So something that we've obviously been concerned about in the past. Alternative sources of revenue, we've already mentioned this one again, just allowing us to have other mechanisms to capture revenues given the change in how our economy works. And again, elimination of unfunded mandates. Questions? All right, public notices and open meetings, pretty broad category there, but this is basically wanting an equal playing field between state and local governments as how we have to be transparent and basically, not requiring stuff of us they wouldn't require of themselves. So any comments or questions on that? Okay.
Commissioner Davis?
I'm going to be hitting a pretty hot topic here. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So has there been any discussion on the law that basically says, depending upon the population of your county, your election official is appointed by the governor, as opposed to elected or locally appointed by a government entity? I don't know if Commissioner Burrough, you could provide some information on that, but that's of great interest to me.
Commissioner Davis, if I may, I don't believe I understood the question. So, and it's sounding a little muffled over here, and I'm getting a little hard of hearing, so I'm really trying to pay attention here.
Yeah, so the question is about the law that says, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but depending upon the population of your county, your election official is appointed, as opposed to if you had a different or a lower population, they would be locally elected or locally appointed.
I agree with that statement. There's only, I think there's 4 counties that qualify that the Secretary of State appoints, and that's Wyandotte, Johnson, Sedgwick, and Shawnee County. And they're appointed by the Secretary of State.
Well, yeah, I guess my point in bringing that up is I would like to see that as a priority of ours, just because we are kind of given, right, someone from Topeka is saying this is the person that's going to run your election process, as opposed to whoever that person is being beholden and kept accountable to our community and how we want to run our elections. I don't know how other commissioners feel about that being added as a priority, but this past election, we went through quite a bit, and I would just like to see there be more local accountability measures in regards to elections here.
Commissioner Markley, do you have a question? Okay.
So what I can do is draft something up for when this comes back to you for you guys to consider as an ad alternate. I guess that's the best way to go about it, unless somebody else has a recommendation for me. So. Okay.
Commissioner Bynum?
If I'm understanding where you're coming from, it would be a state law change, I guess, that would allow that. And I guess we would have to work with Johnson, Sedgwick, Shawnee, unless we were asking for our own carve out. And either way, I'm fine. You know, but we'd either work with the 3 other large counties to ask for that change so that we can elect our own, like 101 other counties do, or we just ask for our own exemption, special exception to state law that applies only to Wyandotte, or just makes us like the other 101 that elect their commissioners. Do you see it one way or the other necessarily?
Yeah, Commissioner Davis speaking. Yeah, I would say, I mean, we probably would have more political power and will if we joined in with the other counties that are having to deal with this. I think Douglas County is getting there, where they also will kind of lose that ability to have their own locally appointed or locally elected election official. And so I'm all good with, collaborating with other counties to see what we can do about this and if there's any political will behind it.
All right. Any other thoughts? Okay. All right. So the next section is public health and environment, and I'm going to do my best here. Alan may step in on a couple of these, and it's possible that Julianne may be available to join us, but she was taking care of some necessary home matters first. So on this slide here, again, these are ones we've added some wording to or brought forward where we didn't feel like there was anything that was of significant consternation that would be with the governing body, but I think most of these were just minor tweaks or adding some data in. So again, local health funding, several other things we've had on here. It's where there hasn't been a continued investment by the state into that. I would think, most of us understand the challenges we have around mental health and things of that nature, or our public health departments this last couple of years. So it's there. Medicaid expansion, we've talked about this over the years, as well as behavioral health programs. We really struggle here to fund those, and we have some great organizations that do work for us, but it's seeing more state funding there, as well for our aging programs for the county. So these are all pretty important ones. And the next slide, I think I cover one of them that I had highlighted on here. It was this one. I don't think it should have been in there. The expedited partner therapy is actually shouldn't have been in this list. So it's down further in the questions about adding. So on this one, this is kind of over on the environmental side. These are energy efficiency. The states had energy efficiency programs in the past, used them in other municipalities. They were wonderful. Not seen a broad deployment of funds to this that I'm aware of, at least in the last 7 or 8 years. Also, again, here, local control for municipalities is if they have utilities and how they manage and operate those. Assistance from the state on stormwater management, especially the technical side. They have a regulatory component that they provide, but they don't really provide assistance from a technical standpoint on how to meet their expectations. And then a collaborative approach between state and local governments on handling hazardous waste. I can tell you, a few months ago, we had a spill and we had a heck of a time figuring out what to do with it and how to even get someone there to help us take care of it. And it's a problem and it's a safety issue for our first responders as well. So and the last one is just on clean air, air quality controls in our community. You know, if we have issues with someone with pollution, the state's got a pretty basic program when it comes to that. And then these were the Tobacco 21 and the expedited partner therapy. So what Tobacco 21 is about is setting the age for purchase up to 21. We've supported similar types of work here at a local level. And then a legislation allowing therapy for the partner of someone who's received that has a sexually transmitted disease to kind of get them immediately that HIPAA isn't blocking that help. Alan, do you have something better on that? Or more succinct?
Alan Howe, Assistant County Administrator. I mean, I think what it says in the policy is kind of pretty self-explanatory. There's the problem with passing infection back and forth between partners. So this identifies when one partner comes in for treatment, it's automatically assumed that the other partner likewise benefit from treatment. And so both are given that at the same time as a way to block the chain of transmission.
Okay. Any questions on any of those items before I move on to the next section? Okay. All right. So these are where we have that are just straight ads that that staff didn't feel we had clear direction one way or the other on. I do think the first one is probably a pinch hit for you all, but I could be wrong. So the Kansas Emergency Management Act during COVID-19 was amended, but when it was done, there was significant language in there that was struck that now limits state and local government's ability to request resources from the federal government. We believe it was an error or just wasn't thought through the way that it should have been, but we do feel like this is something that would be very critical to our municipality, given our topography and the confluence of two rivers, that we have legislation that is going to support access to those federal resources should we need them. So that's something to just think about adding, and I would take any directions or thoughts on that one as I'm standing here. Oops. Sorry, that's a scam likely. Go ahead.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would 100% support putting this into our legislative program, because we all know how that affected us and all local governments, and especially the next portion where it says the local health officer authority, you know, taking a lot of that authority away from them. And it made it harder for us to do our job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every local government, their job is to the people. You know, the state, they oversee the entire state. We're in charge of the people within our boundaries. And it's just taking that local control away from us. It was really hard. So I would 100% support having that as part of our legislative program.
Okay, so I'm going to specifically speak to these individually. So the first one is the Kansas Emergency Management Act. We're transitioning away from just the conversation on like these things have been in here. This is something that occurred last legislative session, I believe, and needs to be corrected fairly promptly, I would think, before we have another disaster on our hands that we are then not able to get the resources that we would normally seek from the federal government. Is that something that everybody can kind of nod their head one way or the other? Are you okay with adding that back in? I'm seeing something like a consensus. Okay. All right. The next one is on energy spikes. I bring this to you. It was something that was brought into the league's document of municipalities, just to be clear, about the energy price increases that occurred in February 2021 that some of us are just going to start seeing in our bills as we go into winter. It's much broader than what I've captured here on this PowerPoint, but concept is there's work to be done in this area. States have a lot of regulatory authority in this area, and also their work to put pressure on the federal government to address some of the issues around how we buy, sell, move energy around the country. So I would take any thoughts on that. I don't have anything specific on what we'd be asking for other than we want to be able to be at the table as it could impact us. General consensus? Okay, all right. And then the next step is the health officer, and I'm going to open that up to you guys. You understand what this is, I believe, for the most part. And again, staff is looking for direction from you all as to whether this is a policy that you would want your lobbyists to advocate for.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you very much, Mayor. I guess I'm pitching this out to the group as well, because if we're talking about restoring the authority of our local health officer to what it was about mid-pandemic, then I think we need to discuss that, because there are probably varying opinions in the room. You know, prior to the changes in the state law, the authority to adopt a local health order was not ours. It was the chief medical officers. And if that's what we're saying, then I think we're probably going to have a variety of opinions here on that. So I would probably want a little bit more detailed information about when the state law changed, what specifically did it change?
A little bit of a follow-up question or statement on that. If the state law just left it up to us and we could decide whether it was us or the local health officer who got the power to do that, I think that would sort of maybe satisfy every potential opinion, because then we could either make the decision to say, no, we're going to let you do that, health officer, or we could say, no, we're going to do that. But right now it's the state saying you don't get a choice. You local governments don't get a choice. So I would say if it's worded so that we can decide who's going to do it, then everybody wins.
I think, I mean, whether or not the state would entertain that is an entirely different question. They seemed very much interested in making sure they told us how the show was going to be run, as they have done many, many, many times before on a variety of topics. Doug, am I remembering it correctly? Because they sort of midway through said, wait a minute, you don't get to do that.
Commissioner, you're exactly right. Doug Bott, County Administrator. I mean, this power did set with the health officer up and midway through, like you said, through the pandemic, and then they removed it from the officer. So it was residing with the elected officials on the county level.
So what we have from Commissioner Markley, I could draft that and put it as an alternate to go in there for your consideration. So you're going to get like an option 1A, and then you can say, I would move to approve with including option 1A. So.
Commissioner Johnson?
Sound good? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Something's not right.
No, look at that, how quickly he fixed it. A pro.
Oh, my God. So looking at the energy spike, how will we interact with DPU relative to what we have here? Because it would seem to me that whatever we would suggest would only go as far as our relationship with DPU would allow.
Mm-hmm.
So will they be included in that dialogue, or it's just a general statement from the UG, from the local authority.
Well, I'll read you the actual verbiage that is currently proposed. We support federal review and investigation of the extraordinary energy price spikes seen throughout the Midwest in winter 21. Based on information gathered, we encourage Congress and the federal, regional, state agencies to make appropriate changes in laws and regulations governing natural gas and electricity production and sales to promote stability in energy prices. So I would think maybe we would want to put something in there based on what you're suggesting that would say in coordination with BPU, perhaps.
I
It's
would,
just a thought.
yeah, exactly.
And then I can reach out to Dave Milhoff. Is that something we generally agree to, that concept, or other thoughts? Okay, all right, that'll, go ahead.
Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I mean, I would just want to add, I mean, as I understand it for the Board of Public Utilities, and please correct me, y'all, if I'm off here, because this is an entity that we, in a sense, own, using that loosely here, please correct me. We probably have more influence over this than we think, as opposed to some of the other jurisdictions that maybe have to deal with Evergy or some of these other private entities. And so coordinating, yes, but I think also like we need to do something. And if we need to delegate or just say, this is what things are going to be, I'm perfectly fine with that. Those are just my views. But they're not a private entity. And I think we should be careful about this as if they are a private entity, because they're not. And we need perhaps a more aggressive approach to addressing some of these energy spikes conversations. Thank you.
Commissioner Kane?
We also had to be mindful that they have their own board. So what I would like to do to go further is sit down with them to talk about that. You know, and the reason I say that, I want to pick their brain. You know, and yeah, we own them, but they have an elected board, and I just think that'd be a smarter way to say, hey, we're pretty sure there's going to be a hike this coming winter. How can we collectively work together to solve the issues?
Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you. And Commissioner Burrows, I would state that our utility is run by a separate board. There's been suggestions in the past maybe to have the KCC step in and regulate and oversee the cost of power in Wyandotte County. But rest assured, just to do that study, it's well over $1 million, and that will be passed on to the ratepayer. So there's concerns in reference to energy spikes. A lot of that was cost of raw materials and the supply chain that caused some of those increases, exorbitant increases. And so when you're cherry picking by industry, those costs can get kind of exorbitant. But just be mindful that our utility, it is our utility. We have an opportunity through the board to address energy costs. But I will state that very few in our community suffered the extreme costs that other counties exhibited and experienced during the last storm crisis that we had. And it encouraged the legislators to implement emergency processes to help with that. I believe that sent a strong calling message across the energy industry to begin with. So, but we'll have to wait and see. But Commissioner Kane, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Kane?
Thank you, Mayor. I also think that when we're doing this, when we get done, we should have the legislators come in and say, here's what we would like you to work on. And see if they already have processes in play, bills ready to go, you know, because we'll get the feeling where they'll help us or they won't. And I know most of them will. But I just think we make ours, maybe they come in and jointly we come up with some more.
Right. Any other thoughts on one? I know that one was a little more complicated, but I wanted to throw it out there to you. Make sure you're still, excited about this. All right. Next up, Youth Fatality Review Board. We've had conversation about this over the last while. It's something that the health department's provided us, basically protections for those review boards doing the work. And then automated, okay, I'm going to stop on that one. Any other questions you have on that? And I can read you the full item if you need it. And I don't know if Julianne's been able to join us yet or not. No.
Well, I can just add that this was one of the things that was on the legislative agenda last year and was successful in getting through the legislature that allowed for the establishment of the Youth Fatality Review Board. This is continuing that sort of process of refinement around sort of data sharing and other things that, this is sensitive, confidential information. So there are sort of interests on both sides, both in getting the information and protecting the information. So this just continues to work on that further refinement of this idea.
Yep. Okay. Someone okay to go ahead and add? All right. Next one, this is automated expungement for certain types of criminal records. I know DA Dupree has been working on some of this, but there seems to be a little bit more nuance that we would like to see from the state. This was again from the health department, and the details are in there. I'm going to again defer to Alan if he wants on this one, or anyone else has any questions, we'll try to answer them directly. And if not, I'm going to ask yes, put it in. I'm seeing some yeses. Okay. All right. And then next is medical marijuana that is coming up in here. And this is kind of like basically what it's, again, from the health department, or it was actually suggested language from the league. They were basically looking for guidance and information for how local cities should handle it, and for consideration if they were to approve use of medical marijuana in the state, how municipalities could tax it. So that's kind of the concept here. It's not as much direction on what we want as much as consideration of how we would be at the table.
Commissioner Kane.
Coming from a redneck, this is going to sound kind of funny, but we need to do everything we can to encourage medical marijuana. And the reason I say that is both my parents suffered long-term illnesses, and anything that we could have given them to relieve the pain, I would have done it. So I think this is one of our bigger ones myself. And actually my father-in-law for that matter. But not so much about the money. It's just making our people, when they really need some help to move on, I just think something that I think we should really capture this.
Second.
Commissioner Davis.
I mean, I may be alone here, but I'll push it even further. I would want, full legalization of cannabis on here. If you look at Illinois, if you look at Colorado, if you look at some of these other states, I know more studies are being done as far as the impact goes. But when we talk about revenue and we talk about just the potential of what it could do for our community, I think it's worth the conversation, and it's worth us looking at an honest review of the impact on these other states and what it could do for Wyandotte County and the state of Kansas.
So my approach at the moment is to bring this back for you to vote on as an alternate as it currently reads, unless I get direction to go further as Commissioner Davis has suggested.
Commissioner Burrough.
Thank you. I think this is a subject matter. I want to key off of what Commissioner Kane said, Representative Burrows here. It might be important to talk to the legislative delegation and get a broader view as to what is just being discussed in Topeka at this time. I will share with you my personal experiences. We didn't even have these discussions 3 years ago, and we're making headway in having that discussion. And there's only 4 states left in the nation that, if I stand corrected, that don't provide any sort of legalization of marijuana. And it's all in the Midwest, and we are surrounded by 3 states, except for 1, that has taken some form of action of legalization. But Kansas continues to be a conservative state with conservative laws on the book. This is not much different than us wanting gaming years ago and all the trials and tribulations that came with the subject of gaming. I would just state that I liked how you proposed it, medical cannabis. It's important that we discuss medical cannabis and not legalization of marijuana. The subject matter is quite the same, but I would just encourage us to talk about the medical cannabis. That I would ask that you may want to pose this to your delegation and hear a broader view as to what the subject matter is going forward on this issue.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll swing at this one and see what you guys think when you bring it back forward. And I do know the legislative delegation, we are working to put something together on that. So just to address some of those comments, know that that is up and coming. This next one, I am seriously going to struggle on, and I'm sorry, but I'm hoping either Alan or Julianne can help me. Removing active consent from school surveys. Apparently it's something that's limited our data gathering potential on information around youth. And it's really, it ties back into that SB 40 bill that we were talking about earlier, and kind of removal of discretion in times of health emergencies. So I can't give you all the detail on it. Alan, do you have any more on that one?
Just a little bit more. Alan House, Assistant County Administrator, and this is sort of change from kind of an opt out to an opt in when you're doing surveys, and so that requiring that active consent means going that extra couple steps, and so that tends to limit participation in survey collection, and so this has been something that has inhibited the collection of some of the health data. So this is looking to remove that language pretty much back to the way it was, because for a long time, the opt-out was the default for this type of survey information, and that's what the state collected.
Okay, that helps me a lot. Thank you, Alan. Thoughts on this one? Add it, don't add it, worry about it later.
Commissioner McKiernan, you good?
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. I just want to follow this up a little bit more. So if we remove active consent and we no longer go to a parent or a guardian and say, do you consent for this information to be collected and aggregated anonymously, I'm sure, but so at what level is that done? Is that the individual school level? Is that the school district level? Is that the state level? At what level, who administers that, where a family knows unless you explicitly opt out, your data can be gathered and aggregated anonymously? And if you don't have the answer to that question, that's fine. But I'd like to just know kind of how that's going to be run.
Well, in this instant, it was done by the public health officer. So this ties back into the kind of removal of any authority of the public health officer, as I'm reading this, and places it back on folks like yourselves or school boards who, aren't the medical experts per se.
Well, and actually maybe caveat that.
Alan.
So I think it's a statewide survey. It's like the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is, I think, actually a national survey, and it looks at behaviors associated with, alcohol consumption and sexual behavior and those sorts of activities, and it gives insight for public health departments on activities, but also sort of strategies for, are things going up or things going down? And so that they use that baseline of information as part of the designation or design of public health strategies. And so I don't know the answer to your question. We'll find out that specifically, but that's the intent behind the survey. Commissioner Bynum, I don't know if there's anything to add.
I was just going to say that I'm aware that those risk and protective factor surveys are given in the public schools at a variety of grade levels. And that's why I'm kind of leaning for remove the active consent, because especially in Wyandotte, the more data we can capture around that specific survey, the better our health policy will be.
I completely agree with that, but I know that there are some who just want to make sure that they know how their data may be accessed and may be used. And so taking out the active consent is fine with me as long as there's a mechanism in place for adequately communicating to all involved families, parents, students, how and when their data may be used. Thank you.
Sounds like we have a proposal to kind of amend the language, and I would work with Julianne, but to have something that's part of this that would, if it was adopted by the legislature, would allow parents, legal guardians to be able to understand how this data was being used. So is everybody
It
kind of
may actually be in place now, or there may be a framework for it existing already that I'm simply unaware of. But, and historically, have we gotten the document that has, and this is a prelude to that document, isn't it? We've gotten the little document that has the actual language that we are proposing. So this is a prelude to that. Getting that may help clear up everything that I have a question on. So I will simply wait for that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And this was sent out, and it's quite the paragraph. So, but it was a while ago. So I do
Put
apologize.
that out about a month ago, Commissioner.
Yeah. 20.
So you would have a kind of a red line to review in advance of the actual language.
Just for you, Brian. You got it out early.
Yeah, we were going to do this a couple weeks ago, and so that's why the gap. So I do apologize, but that's why I'm actively trying to go through this to a level of detail, plus taking in mind there are some new folks sitting here with us tonight. So I thought that was important too. So, all right. So I will have that one come back with the caveat on there, and we'll see if that already exists in the way it was currently phrased before it was amended with SB 40. All right, down here, next one, and we're getting close to the end, guys. So we'll sprint together. Government competition. Basically, this goes back to where free markets are failing folks. And I think we have examples of that in our community when it comes to broadband infrastructure, small cells, et cetera, et cetera. Basically that if a local government wanted to step in and be able to do something like that, say, should you choose with some new federal grant program that you want to do that you should be able to. Not that we are or are not, it's just giving us the ability to be able to make those determinations and not tell us as local governments we can't provide cable TV service, as an example. So I have no clue where that's coming from. So that's kind of what that one's all about. It's a generic statement. Thoughts on that one? Yay or nay? Don't need it if you don't want it. Not very excited. I'm not looking to put it in if I don't get some, don't care. Okay. The next one's on small cell design and performance standards. Basically, this was a request from our planning department to, again, allow us to have some regulation over the look and feel and placement of these new small cell towers. A lot of local governments have some consternation about how that will be done as they're being more broadly deployed. So again, it's not to completely regulate every last bit of it, but to give us some authority that they can't stick it in the middle of the street. So. Everybody okay with that? Probably won't get it, just so you know, but there we go. Sorry, color commentary. Water quality or I've been digging as part of an association that I'm working with around water rights, water in Kansas. This impacts more of the BPU, but it also could impact our residents. And as governing body, I wanted to bring these forward to you. Water quantity, this is again protection to conserve and protect municipal water supplies. And we are a municipal water supply through BPU. And if that, just figure out where it's coming from. If the state is actively working in this space, we would be better off because there is a lot of interest to divert supply, in this case from the Kansas River, which would have, or the Missouri River upstream, that could have impact. This would give us authority at the state level. And I would also say going forward, we might want to consider something of this nature at the federal level. As an example, right now, Kansas City, Missouri is digging several wells to get through this winter because the Missouri River is going to be at an all-time low over the winter, and their ability to pull water out of the Missouri River is being compromised. These are by choices being made upstream in the river in other states. So, but we are seeing issues like this start to come up within the state of Kansas, within the Kansas River Basin. So any thoughts or comments on that one? Gives us the opportunity to watch what's happening. So, and doesn't provide directive other than to watch. So, okay. And water planning, again, this also would be kind of an engagement around the state to plan more for water. Recently spent some time with the state water office and have been learning about the challenges they have to address water issues and water fund for water projects. So also something that doesn't directly impact us today, but could down the road, and advanced planning would be smart in this area. Thoughts? Yes, no, comments? You can see how it goes. You can remove it. Okay. And I believe we have one more left, and this one might excite some people, actually two more. I'm going to cover the bottom one first on housing. The state recently put out a new housing study, has some recommendations in it. A lot of things that we've talked about around this room over the last number of years as it relates to our blight issues, but also quality housing, affordable and quality housing, and different programs. So basically just says we support this. If you're interested, there's a state website. I'd be happy to share with you on that, but looks like I'm getting some head nods on that one, and it should be a slam dunk, I would think. Okay. Last one, golden years, property tax legislation. Talked a lot about this one and how we would bring this to you. There's been conversation in my 20-some years in Kansas now around this in different times at the table. Trying to find a way to do this that protects seniors of a certain age and of a certain financial capacity with the burdens of increased evaluations. I think the caveat of age and financial capacity is something that this governing body should be interested in considering, not just age. The other thing is perhaps a cap or an escalating cap on how fast it can go up. This year with inflation, we all know that everything's been going up, and even Social Security is going up by almost 6%. So I think those are things that would need to be part of this in order to do as much to protect and hold us harmless, but yet give those folks who have made their contributions to society the opportunity to stay in their homes. So.
Commissioner Johnson.
I just simply want to double down on that. We need to do that post haste. I think with increasing market values across the nation and certainly in our own community, this is something that we're going to be having to address. Well, it's already something that we have to address.
Mhm.
and it's only going to increase. And so this is something that hopefully with the state's aid, somehow we can find something that can address this, particularly in Wyandotte County.
Other
Commissioner
thoughts?
Bynum?
Commissioner Kane did, okay, well, I'm gonna say, I have a variety of questions, I guess. My first one would be, how does a concept such as possibly holding flat evaluation interplay with our new law that we have to follow, the revenue neutral legislation that says, you know, you can't raise your values higher than that. So those two, I'm kind of contemplating how those things are together. But the second thing that this makes me think of is, it's not so much that I want the valuation flat as I want the tax bill flat. Because as mom ages, you know, if there comes the day that she's got to transition out of that home into assisted living and we're selling that house, we sure want as much as we can possibly get for it. Because she's going to need that money in her new assisted living facility. So it's not, and if valuations are rising, we want her to take advantage of that and get the best price possible for her home as she leaves it. So I would be interested in crafting language that supports keeping the mill levy different. That's the only way you're going to get a different answer for her, is that she pays at a different mill levy rate. So I would be very interested in how we can do that.
I think, as Doug Bach, County Administrator, I think we would have to keep our language on this one fairly general, because whatever language comes before the State House, and I know there's some conversation about proposing things, if our concept is one where we believe we want to, I mean, our concept is we want to keep the tax burden lower or neutral or minor differences for those in senior populations. How that's done, you know, I don't think we can write enough formulas that, well, we do it this way or this way. You know, we're not the ones that are going to make this legislation happen. It's going to be showing our support for it. And if that's where we're trying to gather and put on here, that if that's where we want to be and you all support that, yeah, that'll have some impact on our revenues in the future. It doesn't take money away. It just doesn't allow us to grow until that property sells at some later date. So if we can write it in that form, and then we just know we can actively engage to show support if something comes, and if it's gray as to what the language is, then we may have to come back during the session and say something to you if it's important where we are.
Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Burrows, I would state that if we want to move forward with this, I think it's a subject that has had much discussion in our local community. But right behind the word evaluations, we might want to put and taxes or taxes, because I think that covers both subject matters. And I mean, we understand what valuation happens when mill levy stays the same. It's still more money. It's a complicated formula for some. I would just state that I would like to see the word taxes added to this, because I believe that's what people truly understand.
Commissioner Stites?
Chuck Stites, District 7. And as I had my hand on there, but as you guys are going across there, I completely 100% agree. I think that Commissioner Bynum, when you brought up the R&R, that and holding the freezing the appraised value is not the direction that we need to be going. Because just like you said, when we go to resell and things change, whether our loved one or the situation goes into assisted living or what, and we need to sell that house, then we need that to be appraised at this cost. So freezing the tax, the property tax, is what I'm absolutely all for.
So is everyone okay with suggesting an age and financial? Again, this goes back to Commissioner McKiernan. I'm just wondering if you're on the wrong side of the cutoff. If it's a bad idea or not, but just a thought on that. But I think that's how we could phrase it, and then we'll attach it to the actual tax amount, and then see what happens. Sound good? Guys, I believe that is it for me. And thank you for putting up with me in a marathon, not a sprint. All right, thanks, everyone.
Quickly, are there any other last minute comments as we prepare for our next session? Quickly, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, very, very quickly. I think, given the amount of different proposals here, if we can just get some sense of other jurisdictions similar to our size and what their priorities are, and maybe a big 5 or a big 10, just to kind of narrow down. These are a lot of policy proposals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our special session. We are adjourned. We will reconvene.